Welcome to ProRevenge, where two girlfriends who stepped out of line get exactly what was coming to them. The first story starts with someone using a throwaway account. Back in late May 2016, he finally asked out his crush of 3 years, Kate, and they grabbed coffee together. After 3 dates, the two made it official. For the next 7 months, everything felt almost unreal. They connected over countless interests, rarely argued, were open and honest with each other, and shared an incredible sex life. Both were doing well financially, so they often spoiled one another, and even their families were enthusiastic about the relationship. In January 2017, he was accepted into his country's Armed Forces Reserve program as a combat engineer. Basic training began in February and lasted until late April. It was the hardest experience of his life at that point. There were moments he thought he would fail, but Kate's encouragement through texts and calls kept him going. She was even there when he graduated, beaming with pride. Part of being in the reserves meant advanced training in the summer, which required him to be away from early June until late August, about 400 kilometers from home. Kate supported his decision, even though it meant sacrificing most of their summer together. That summer proved brutal for him. He was excluded from every clique, constantly picked on, and his self-esteem plummeted. The only thing that kept him pushing forward was Kate's faith in him. In the end, he graduated as the 5th best in his course and credited her support for getting him through. But things changed when he returned. Kate started saying he wasn't as outgoing or spontaneous as before. He took jokes too seriously, brushed off small things, and preferred staying in for movies and intimacy rather than going out. What neither realized at the time was that the summer had left him with a heavy dose of social anxiety, which started to creep into and damage their relationship. As they neared their 2-year anniversary in 2018, a small misunderstanding blew up into a major fight, and they broke up. He was devastated until 3 days later, Kate reached out saying she wanted to work things out. Though they didn't see each other for weeks, they stayed in touch and eventually got back together. But it wasn't the same. He felt like he was walking on eggshells around her, which only fed his anxiety and made things worse. By late July, everything unraveled. Kate had gotten close to a guy named John, someone she met at school. John had been there to comfort her during the breakup and whenever her boyfriend messed up afterward. Though he knew about John, he never believed Kate would cross any boundaries with him. One night, he went to Kate's place as planned, only to find her and John hanging out on the couch. Kate explained John had just stopped by and was on his way out. But afterward, she was cold and distant. Sensing the end, he asked her where they stood. She admitted she felt the same way. Their relationship was over. They agreed to break up the following day, but since it was late, she offered for him to stay the night. What struck him was how she clung to her phone, shielding the screen from him, which was out of character. In the past, she never cared if he glanced while she texted her friends. When he asked, she dismissed it as private matters, which only made him suspicious. That night, after Kate fell asleep, curiosity got the better of him. He unlocked her phone. He already knew the passcode and discovered hundreds of messages between her and John. The texts were cruel. Kate telling John how excited she was to finally be public as a couple now that she was single, mocking her boyfriend for every little thing he did and celebrating being rid of him. Heartbroken, he sat there quietly sobbing until his crying woke Kate up. Realizing what he was reading, she exploded in anger. He had no words to fight back, so he simply gathered his belongings and walked out as she shouted after him. When he got home, he broke down, crying through the night. The next day, he couldn't bring himself to go to work. Things got even worse when Kate began spreading lies. She told her friends and family and anyone who would listen that on that final night, he had forced himself on her. According to her, he wanted one last time before leaving, and after he got what he wanted, he walked out. She claimed the experience was traumatic, but that she was too kind-hearted to press charges because she didn't want the circus of a trial. He was terrified. He thought her accusations might cost him his military career and stain his reputation forever. But nothing came of it. Still, the fear haunted him for months. Then, about 5 months later, Kate slid back into his messages. After some casual small talk, she apologized and admitted she had made up the whole story. Of course, she said she'd never admit that publicly because she had a reputation to protect. He was furious, but instead of lashing out, he stayed calm. He took screenshots of her confession and kept chatting with her as though nothing had happened. Over the next 3 months, a cycle emerged. She would complain about her new life with John, how he let her down, how he wasn't the man she thought he was, how she missed the stability of their past relationship. Then, after venting, she'd go quiet on him whenever John managed to pull off some big romantic gesture that temporarily patched things up. When John disappointed her again, she'd come crawling back, repeating the same routine. She loved to drag our relationship drama onto social media, rallying her friends to gang up on me, fully aware that I would see it all. Her goal was always the same: bait me into an argument. And truthfully, it worked more often than I'd like to admit. She would twist the fight around, play the victim, make me look like the villain, and then block me for about a month before repeating the same exhausting cycle. This happened 3 separate times, each one leaving me drained and broken. Yet, some part of me secretly wanted it to happen again. Each time, though, I quietly collected receipts. Screenshots of every toxic thing she sent me filled up an entire SD card. Eventually, I had built a complete record of her lies, her cruelty, and her manipulative behavior. That's when I decided I'd had enough. It was time to act. I printed copies of the most incriminating messages, slipped them into manila envelopes, and mailed them to everyone who had any importance in her life. I sent them to her parents, her grandparents, extended family, close friends, her boss, coworkers, even old teachers, anyone I could track down an address for. I made it very clear that the conversations were between her and me. The fallout came quickly. Within 3 weeks, the same people who once messaged me to shame and attack me were now apologizing for believing her lies. My favorite message came from her parents. They admitted they were deeply ashamed of their daughter's behavior, said they had raised her better, and even begged me not to pursue legal action. Truth be told, I had thought about it, but I didn't have the money or energy to start a court battle. I told them that if I did change my mind, they would be the first to know, after their daughter. Of course, Kate didn't take it well. She bombarded me with furious texts. "How could you betray me? And you ruined my life, you bastard." I didn't respond to a single one. I just read them with a smug smile and blocked her once the messages stopped coming. I never found out the full extent of the damage my revenge caused her, but I do know 2 things. She dropped out of school, and she lost her job. Hopefully, her fling with John was worth throwing her life away for. The next story comes from someone else. Back when I was a clueless freshman, I rushed into dating a girl who lived right above me in the dorms. We'll call her Megan. The convenience of her being so close blinded me to the fact that nearly everyone else in our building couldn't stand her. Megan was known for being loud, self-absorbed, and constantly bragging about how aggressive she was. I should have seen those red flags, but I ignored them. Right after Thanksgiving break, my mom gave me a call. She had noticed strange charges on my checking account. I didn't have a credit card at the time, just a debit card linked to my savings. I hardly ever spent money on campus, so I was confused to learn that $104.29 had been drained from my account over the course of 2 weeks through 6 Grubhub orders. Naturally, I asked Megan about it. She denied everything and even suggested I cancel my card. After a frustratingly long call with the bank, I did just that. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to know who was behind the orders. So I reached out to Grubhub support on Twitter. I explained that my card had been stolen and asked for copies of the receipts. They sent me the first and last ones, but they tried to block out the personal details of the account holder. Tried is the keyword. They had only scribbled over the info with the Snapchat draw tool, and Megan's name was still perfectly visible underneath. To top it off, the most recent order had been placed just 2 hours earlier. She was probably still eating the food when I was cutting up my debit card. I texted her again. "I have the receipts from Grubhub. Are you sure you didn't make these orders?" Her reply? "Thank you for suspecting me." Aggressive, just like she always bragged about. At that point, I was determined to get video footage of her picking up the order. But before I could put my plan into action, she showed up at my door at midnight, crying. She confessed to everything, not only the Grubhub theft but also that she was a serial shoplifter. I was too drained to deal with her, so I told her to leave and figured I'd sort it all out in the morning. The next day, the entire building seemed to know what was happening, most likely because Megan had already started spreading her own twisted version of events. I sent her a breakup text and considered the $104.29 a lost cause. At least I had cut ties with her. Or so I thought. 2 days later, while I was sitting at my desk, she slipped into my room without me noticing. Suddenly, she was standing silently behind me. She demanded I give her her stuff. When I asked what she meant, she refused to say. She stormed around my room, searching for something she never identified, and then left just as suddenly. Not long after, she came back and started pounding on my door, yelling and swearing. The knocking turned into violent banging, and then she began throwing her body against the door, trying to break it down. The heavy wooden frame was bending and cracking under the pressure. I texted my RA for help, but he was on duty in another building. He sent 3 other RAs over, and they arrived just in time to drag Megan away before she broke through. It turned out that the stuff she wanted back was nothing more than a t-shirt and a keychain she had given me for my birthday. Even after everything that had happened, I just wanted things to finally be over. But once I shared my side of the story with the residence life staff, they didn't just let it go. They immediately filed university paperwork that put a no-contact order in place between me and Megan. They also strongly suggested I reach out to campus police. When I spoke to the officers, they told me that if I wanted my stolen money back, the best route would be to take her to small claims court. Of course, I had no way of even getting to court, no car, no extra cash for an Uber, so that idea went nowhere. At the request of the police, I also reached out to the Title IX office and sent them everything. Essentially the same story you've just heard from me. I wasn't looking for trouble, just closure and the ability to move on. But the representative at Title IX told me they were moving forward with 3 formal misconduct charges against Megan: theft, threatening violent behavior, and inciting university staff intervention. Then, they asked me if I'd be willing to testify as a witness during her disciplinary hearing the following semester. Reluctantly, I agreed. When the rep told me the hearing date, I thought they were joking. It was scheduled for February 14th, Valentine's Day. But sure enough, that's when it was set. By the time the hearing rolled around, the no-contact order was still active. But some of my friends had been keeping me updated about Megan. Apparently, she had flunked every single one of her classes in the fall. Someone from my math course even admitted to me that Megan had tried to sleep with him while she was still dating me, and he had to shut her down multiple times. On top of that, she had been spreading a warped version of the story, trying to twist it so my own friends would turn on me. And just when I found out she had a new boyfriend, I couldn't help but smile at the timing. Valentine's Day wasn't exactly going to go the way they planned. When I showed up at the disciplinary board office, I had no idea what to expect. The panel was made up of grad students, and the hearing was supposed to last well into the night. I came alone. Megan, on the other hand, showed up with backup, her parents. They tried to act as her character witnesses, which wasn't even something that was supposed to happen in this kind of proceeding. And that wasn't all. Her parents had actually hired a lawyer in a full suit to defend her, as though this were some kind of courtroom trial. The board members quickly made it clear that wasn't necessary, but Megan's parents were so convinced she was innocent that they had already paid for his services. To balance things out, the board offered me free legal help. My lawyer ended up being a junior economics major. Let's call him Jimmy. He had already gone through my written account of everything, and when he saw the Grubhub receipts I had saved, he told me we actually had a pretty solid chance of making the charges stick. That's when I revealed something I hadn't told anyone up until then. The night Megan tried to break down my dorm door, I hadn't just texted my RA, I had recorded the whole thing on video. Jimmy's eyes lit up the moment he saw it. The footage showed Megan, crystal clear, kicking and screaming, trying to force her way into my room. It was the smoking gun we never expected to have. When it came time for my testimony, Jimmy put the video up on a large screen for everyone to see. The reaction was explosive. Up until that moment, it had been her word against mine. Megan had convinced nearly everyone that I was the one lying. In her story, She claimed I had given her permission to use my food account, that I had been the one cruelly hiding her belongings, and that she was simply the victim of my supposed attempts to destroy her reputation. But once the video played, the whole room changed. Her parents completely lost it, demanding why she hadn't told them about this before. Her lawyer jumped up, shouting about how this evidence wasn't disclosed ahead of time. One of the board members cut him off sharply. "This is not a court of law, sir. Please sit down." But he kept shouting, "Objection," only to be told again, "We don't do objections here." Meanwhile, Jimmy was doing everything he could to hold back laughter. That was the exact moment I realized how satisfying justice could feel when it was truly deserved. The board ultimately found Megan guilty on all 3 charges. On my side of the bench, the recommendation was that she be kicked out of campus housing and forced to pay restitution. Her side pushed for nothing more than a reprimand and repayment. The board met in the middle. Megan's family paid back most of the money she had stolen, though her lawyer managed to argue one duplicated food order off the list. And Megan was required to move into a different dorm building. Honestly, that may have been a blessing for her, since by that point nearly every student in our program knew the truth about what she'd done and wanted nothing to do with her. She had no one left willing to room with her. By the time she moved, she had already failed her classes again. Her parents had spent thousands on her tuition, her unused dining plan, her lawyer, and the restitution. Finally, they withdrew her from the university entirely. As for where things ended up, I heard later that she came back as a part-time student, but I never saw her again thanks to the no-contact order. I even became Facebook friends with the guy she once tried to seduce, and Jimmy, the econ major turned pro bono lawyer, and I still keep in touch on LinkedIn. And me? I learned my lesson. I no longer date people who come on as aggressively as she once did. Looking back, Megan stole from me, tried to cheat, lied to my friends, and painted me as the villain. In the end, the punishment may have been harsh, but she dug that hole herself. And as much as I didn't want revenge, it turns out that real, fair consequences can be the sweetest form of it.